Hello everyone, and welcome to Behind the Bulletin. Today, we're diving into a story that has set social media buzzing once again. Photos allegedly taken at a private residence involving Jang, Ki-yong and Eun-jin have suddenly surfaced, reigniting dating rumors many thought had faded away. What do these images really show? Why are they causing such intense reactions right now? And how did a quiet moment turn into a headline overnight? Stay with us as we unpack the details, the reactions, and what might come next, starting right now. It didn't start with a press conference. It didn't start with an official statement. It started the way modern scandals always do, quietly, viciously, and without permission. Single post appeared, then vanished. A blurred image, a timestamp. Caption written like a match being struck in a dark room. Within minutes, screenshots had already escaped. Within an hour, the words private residence were everywhere, typed in all caps, wrapped in question marks, followed by the two names that instantly turned curiosity into frenzy, Jang, Ki-yong and Eun-jin. At first, people didn't even ask if it was real. They asked only one thing: where did this come from? Because that's the part that makes your stomach drop. Not the rumor itself, the origin. The thought that something meant to be private could be pulled into the light by strangers who didn't knock. Did it hesitate? Didn't care. Internet doesn't enter a room politely. It breaks the door down and calls it news. The photos, at least the ones circulating, weren't glamorous. That was what made them feel dangerous. No red carpet. No curated angle. No perfect lighting. Instead, the images carried the unsettling texture of the ordinary: a hallway shadow, a familiar doorway, a corner of an interior that looked lived in rather than designed. The kind of detail that makes people lean closer to their screens and whisper, "This feels too real." And then came the second punch: the timing. Dating rumors don't reignite out of nowhere. They reignite when the public is already primed, when two people have been linked before, when a past interaction has been dissected, when chemistry has been turned into a narrative that refuses to die. All it takes is one spark, and suddenly every old clip gets dragged back into the open like evidence. Someone reposted an interview moment where one of them laughed a second too long. Someone clipped a behind-the-scenes glance that could mean everything or nothing. Someone dug up a schedule overlap and framed it like destiny. The story rebuilt itself in real time, brick by brick, fueled by people who weren't there but spoke like they were. Then the most volatile word arrived: proof. It's a word the internet loves because it feels final. It feels like power. But proof online is often just a photo with no verified context. A fragment turned into a conclusion by thousands of voices shouting over each other. Still, once people decide they were looking at proof, they stop asking questions and start demanding answers. And that's when the pressure shifts from rumor to crisis. Because if the images are authentic, the invasion is brutal. If the images are not authentic, the implications are still brutal, because someone is manufacturing intimacy, weaponizing a private space narrative, and watching it spread like wildfire. Either way, the result is the same: the internet wins, and the people at the center lose control of their own story. The reactions exploded in predictable waves. Shock first, then excitement, then judgment. Some comments read like celebration, fans screaming about a real-life couple. Others read like interrogation, people insisting they deserved clarification. And then came the darker wave. The one that always follows: accusations, blame, demands, and the cruel insistence that public figures owe the public an explanation for what happens behind closed doors. It didn't help that private residence is the kind of phrase that ignites imagination. The public doesn't just picture two people in a room, they build an entire drama around it. They create timelines, motives, secret meetings, hidden messages, and meaning in every object visible in a blurry corner of a frame. This is where things turn truly tense, when strangers start speaking with certainty about what they cannot possibly know. People claim they recognized the layout, claimed they recognized the furniture. Some insisted it matched a past social media background. Someone zoomed in on a reflection, circled it, and labeled it confirmation. Another person called it fake and posted a side-by-side comparison like a courtroom exhibit. The internet became a trial where everyone was both witness and judge, and the accused were not even allowed in the room. And while the crowd fought over authenticity, the bigger question loomed like a shadow: how did images tied to private home surface at all? Because that question isn't entertainment. It's a warning. The more people talked, The faster the rumor mutated. What began as photos surfaced became they were caught. What began as dating rumors became secret relationship confirmed. The language hardened with every repost. Every headline rewrite. Every dramatic caption. The truth, whatever it actually was, got trampled under the weight of a story people preferred because it was more thrilling than uncertainty. Then, as if the situation needed one more twist, an alleged timeline started circulating: dates, supposed sightings, claims of neighbors noticing, anonymous accounts insisting they knew for months. This is where the tension goes from gossip to something uglier: the attempt to pull real locations, real habits, real patterns into the open. That's when the story stops being about romance and starts being about safety. And the most chilling part? The crowd rarely notices the moment it crosses that line. By the end of the day, rumor had reignited fully. Not as a question, but as a storm. People were no longer asking what happened. They were asking when the statement would come. The only acceptable outcome was a public response, an admission, a denial, a performance. But silence is not confirmation. Silence is often strategy. Silence is often protection. And sometimes silence is the only option when the narrative has already been stolen. Still, the pressure kept rising. Because the internet doesn't allow stories to cool down. It demands escalation. It demands a new piece of evidence. It demands a bigger shock. Just as the first wave began to settle into exhausted arguments, a second set of images, more cropped, more zoomed, more aggressively framed, started to circulate. And with them came a terrifying possibility. This wasn't a one-time leak. This was a chain. The second wave hit harder because it felt intentional. The first set of photos could be dismissed by some as a single breach, one post, one leak, one burst of chaos. But when more images surfaced, the tone shifted. People stopped talking like spectators and started talking like investigators. The language got sharper. Captions got crueler. The speculation got more confident. And confidence, online, is the most combustible fuel of all. Suddenly, the rumor wasn't just reignited. It was weaponized. Accounts that had been quiet for months became loud overnight. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds. Demanded privacy. Others demanded proof. And others demanded punishment, as if two adults being together was something that required a verdict. Meanwhile, the most invasive voices didn't even pretend they cared about the truth. They cared about the thrill of watching a private moment become public property. That's the shock people don't like to admit. The internet doesn't merely observe. It consumes. As the images spread, so did the analysis. People zoomed in on shadows, door frames, background objects with the intensity of forensic teams. The most unsettling part wasn't the speculation about dating, it was the speculation about place. About the interior. About the setting. About the possibility of identifying a home. The moment private residence becomes a clue to solve, it stops being gossip and becomes danger. And that's when the story turned from spicy to chilling. Even if the photos were taken innocently, by someone inside a circle, by someone careless, someone who didn't understand what they were releasing, once they hit the public, they no longer belong to the original moment. They become a map. And the internet is very good at maps. Voices tried to slow it down. They urged people not to share. They reminded others that private spaces are not entertainment. They warned against doxing. But the warnings moved too slowly against the speed of virality. A scandal spreads faster than a conscience. Then came the demand for statements. Celebrity culture. The public treats silence like a stage cue. If no one speaks, people assume there's a reason. If someone denies, assume they're lying. If someone confirms, people assume they owe details. There is no winning, only surviving. What makes this scenario especially tense is the trap it creates. If they speak, they feed the story. If they don't, the story feeds itself. And while the public screamed for clarity, the most important fact remained missing from the conversation. Nobody outside their lives actually knew what the photos represented. A private residence doesn't automatically equal romance. Two people can meet for work, for friends, brief conversations, for reasons that have nothing to do with dating. Even if they are close. Closeness is not a crime. But the internet treats ambiguity as an invitation to rewrite reality into whatever sells best. So the rumor grew teeth. It stopped sounding like maybe and started sounding like obviously. And once a rumor becomes obvious online, it becomes nearly impossible to correct. Even if it's wrong, the correction never goes as viral as the accusation. The truth never travels as fast as the thrill. Then the narrative split into two equally explosive directions. One side romanticized it. They painted the images as proof of a hidden love story finally breaking the surface. They edited clips, wrote dramatic captions, and insisted that fate had been confirmed. They made it feel like a drama plot, beautiful, inevitable, exciting. The other side turned harsh, questioned motives, criticized choices, demanded accountability for things that were never confirmed. They turned the story into a moral judgment. Rumors were facts and privacy was a privilege that could be revoked. In the middle were the only people who truly mattered, the two individuals whose names were being used as fuel. And that's where the real drama lives, not in the rumor, but in what the rumor does to reality. Because once a story like this catches fire, it doesn't stay online. It follows people into meetings, into schedules, into sets, into conversations they didn't choose. It becomes the first thing people look for when they enter a room. It becomes the thing that changes how colleagues act, how staff behave, how cameras linger. Questions are phrased, even if nothing romantic is happening. Humor makes everyone behave as if something is, and that forced performance can ruin real relationships, romantic or not, because it introduces suspicion where there was none, awkwardness where there was ease, pressure where there was normalcy. That's the cruel irony. Rumors don't just report a story, they create one. By the time the storm reached its peak, public was no longer watching two people. It was watching a narrative it had invented, demanding the characters follow the script. And the script had only two endings the crowd would accept, confirmation or denial. But real life doesn't owe the internet an ending. The most shocking possibility is also the simplest. There may be no dramatic reveal at all. Just two people caught in the crossfire of a culture that treats privacy like a challenge, and silence like entertainment. Yet the damage can still be real. Because once private space imagery becomes content, the boundary is already broken. Trust gets shaken. Circles get tighter. People start looking over their shoulder in places they used to feel safe. And even if the rumor fades, the lesson remains, sharp and permanent. So the rumor reignites, yes. But the bigger story isn't the dating question. The bigger story is what it takes for a private moment to become public spectacle. And how quickly the crowd forgets that behind every headline, real people who did not consent to being turned into a case file. In the end, the images, authentic or not, did exactly what viral leaks always do. They stole control. They replaced truth with noise. They turned a personal space into a public stage. The most unsettling part is that the internet will move on. Tomorrow, next week, the next scandal, while the people at the center are left to deal with what remains after the crowd is gone. Not a love story. Not a rumor. A breach. In the end, this story was never truly about dating rumors. It was about how easily a private space can be turned into public spectacle, and how quickly curiosity can become intrusion. Whether the photos tell a full story or none at all. Damage is done the moment a boundary is breached and shared without consent. Jang, Ki-yong and Eun-jin became names in a narrative they did not write, placed at the center of a storm fueled by speculation rather than certainty. What surfaced wasn't just images, it was a reminder of how fragile privacy has become in the age of instant judgment and viral outrage. Once a private moment is pulled into the spotlight, never be fully returned to where it belonged. Rumors will fade. New headlines will replace old ones. But the consequences of exposure linger far longer than public attention. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. Your time, your patience, and your willingness to look beyond the surface matter more than ever in moments like these. We appreciate you for reading thoughtfully, questioning narratives rather than consuming them blindly, for recognizing that behind every viral moment are real people navigating real consequences. Until next time, thank you for being here, and for remembering that not every story needs to be owned by the crowd.